The Davis family always struck people as the kind of picture-perfect household you'd see in a feel-good movie. Nathan and Megan's love story began during their college years. He was knee-deep in his engineering studies, while she was diving into the complexities of political science. Their connection felt natural, almost effortless, and before long, their bond led to a simple yet heartfelt wedding. Together, they built a life that many admired. Nathan was a detail-oriented and dedicated engineering manager, while Megan, with her sharp mind and magnetic personality, worked as an assistant at a well-regarded law firm. Their daughter, Grace, was 16, a determined, curious teenager with a passion for photography and dreams of traveling to every corner of the globe. James, their 14-year-old son, was quieter, more introspective, but he had a gift for sketching comics that his parents wholeheartedly encouraged. Family life centered around the kids' activities. Grace spent her afternoons at soccer practice, while James poured his energy into the school art club. Nathan and Megan were there for every milestone, whether it was cheering from the sidelines at Grace's games, browsing James's art displays at school fairs, or attending his presentations. Weekends at the Davis house were filled with laughter and a strong sense of togetherness. Megan enjoyed cooking up something special, while Nathan manned the grill out back. Their time together was spent playing board games or binge-watching movies, creating moments that any outsider might label as the epitome of happiness. Their home mirrored their personalities, modest but warm, with a personal touch in every corner. Grace's photography adorned the walls of the living room, James's comic books were neatly displayed on a shelf, Nathan's work award sat humbly in his home office, and Megan always kept fresh flowers in vases around the kitchen. Despite their busy schedules, Nathan and Megan prioritized each other, setting aside one night a month for a dinner date at a nearby restaurant or a peaceful walk in the park. These quiet moments together seemed to keep their relationship as strong as it had always been. Yet, beneath the surface of their seemingly unshakable bond, small cracks began to appear. Megan, once so vibrant and full of energy, started to seem more withdrawn. Her laughter, once easy and frequent, grew quieter, and she often appeared lost in her thoughts. Nathan noticed but chalked it up to exhaustion. He figured the demanding pace of her law office job, with its endless deadlines and high-maintenance clients, was taking its toll. He, too, was feeling the weight of his responsibilities at work, but they both seemed to handle their pressures well enough, or so he thought. Despite his efforts to brush it off, subtle shifts in Megan's behavior caught his attention. She began spending more time focusing on herself, buying new outfits and putting extra care into her appearance. Nathan debated bringing it up but chose to let it slide, reasoning that she might just be boosting her confidence amid the stress. After all, Megan had always been independent and enjoyed looking her best. However, the unease Nathan felt began to grow, a nagging feeling he couldn't quite define. It wasn't a full-blown concern, more like a faint shadow in the distance, too vague to be alarming yet impossible to fully dismiss. At Megan's workplace, the law firm where routine reigned supreme, a shakeup arrived in the form of Tyler. He was the kind of man who commanded attention without even trying, young, self-assured, and charismatic in a way that seemed almost magnetic. Tyler, the firm's newly hired attorney specializing in corporate litigation, came with a reputation for tackling difficult cases head-on. From the day he started, Tyler became the office's unofficial star. His laid-back humor and quick wit stood out in the otherwise buttoned-up environment, and it didn't take long for him to win over his coworkers, including Megan. At first, Nathan didn't think much of it. Megan would mention Tyler in passing at home, sharing anecdotes about how he lightened the mood in tense meetings or navigated challenging situations with ease. To Nathan, Tyler sounded like nothing more than a fresh face who brought a little excitement to Megan's otherwise predictable workdays. In the weeks that followed, Nathan noticed Tyler's name creeping into more of their conversations, not constantly, but just enough to catch his attention. Megan's demeanor had shifted in subtle but noticeable ways. She started putting more thought into her appearance for work, opting for new outfits, experimenting with different hairstyles, and even using a perfume she rarely touched. When Nathan jokingly commented on her polished look, saying she seemed a bit overdressed for the office, Megan simply gave a shy smile and quickly changed the subject. Nathan tried to brush it off, but something about her reaction gnawed at him, a feeling he couldn't quite put into words. As for Tyler, he seemed well aware of the charm he wielded. He had a knack for tossing out compliments that landed just right, leaving people feeling seen and appreciated. With Megan, he went the extra mile, bringing her coffee during meetings, showering her with praise about her importance to the team, and occasionally slipping in flirtatious remarks that made her laugh, even if they left her slightly uneasy. While Megan never gave any indication that her dynamic with Tyler was anything more than professional, it was hard to ignore the fact that Tyler enjoyed pushing boundaries, and Megan didn't appear entirely unaffected. One Friday evening, as they sat down for dinner, Megan casually mentioned something that immediately put Nathan on edge. "The firm's planning a retreat," she said, picking at her food. "It's supposed to be good for team building." Nathan's brow furrowed. "Retreat? What kind of retreat?" She went on to explain that the law firm was organizing a weekend getaway at a fancy resort, designed to foster collaboration and strategic alignment. She added, almost too casually, that Tyler would be one of the event organizers. Nathan couldn't help but feel uneasy about the idea, but he knew he couldn't outright forbid her from going. Trying to mask his discomfort, he asked, "Do you really have to go?" Megan's response was defensive, her tone a touch sharper than usual. "It's part of my job, Nathan. There's nothing to worry about." Still, a flicker of doubt lingered in Nathan's mind. He wasn't the jealous or controlling type, but there was something about the situation that unsettled him. What bothered him most was Megan's unwavering defense of Tyler anytime his name came up. On one occasion, after Nathan offhandedly remarked that Tyler seemed a bit too cocky from the stories he'd heard, Megan immediately countered, "He's confident, not arrogant. And honestly, he's incredibly skilled at what he does." Her quick defense planted a seed of doubt in Nathan's mind. Was he reading too much into things, or was there more going on than he realized? As the retreat approached, Nathan couldn't shake the growing sense of unease. Though he tried to keep his concerns hidden, every little detail, from Megan's enthusiasm about the retreat activities to the way she smiled while packing her suitcase, only added to his discomfort. He wanted to trust her, but there was a persistent voice in his head telling him that something didn't feel right. The retreat was held at a luxurious resort nestled in the mountains, surrounded by fresh air and scenic views that seemed to demand relaxation. Megan sent Nathan a text when she arrived, letting him know everything was fine and that she'd be busy with team meetings and activities. His response was brief, "Have fun." But in truth, he couldn't focus on anything else. The uneasy feeling he'd had before was now a full-blown knot in his stomach, and he couldn't stop wondering what it was like for Megan to be around Tyler all weekend. For Megan, the retreat brought mixed emotions. On one hand, the change of scenery was a welcome break from the monotony of daily life, allowing her to breathe a little easier and step away from her usual worries. On the other hand, Tyler's attention was growing more overt, creating an undercurrent of tension she couldn't ignore. During a group activity, he slid into the seat beside her and made a comment that stopped her in her tracks. "You know," he said, his tone low and almost personal, "you're easily the most intriguing person in this entire firm." Megan tried to laugh it off, redirecting the conversation, but she couldn't hide the heat rising in her cheeks. Later that evening, after a casual dinner with colleagues, Tyler approached her with another suggestion. "How about we grab a drink at the bar?" he asked. "I've been meaning to talk to you about some ideas to streamline the firm's processes. Your input would be invaluable." Megan hesitated, feeling a flicker of unease. But she ultimately agreed, convincing herself that it was purely a professional discussion. While Megan was at the retreat, Nathan sent her a message asking how her day was going. She responded quickly, assuring him that everything was fine, but she didn't mention Tyler or their plans to meet at the bar. As Megan sat with Tyler, their conversation flowed easily. He shared stories about his career, recounting some of his toughest cases with a mix of humor and charm. Megan couldn't deny that there was something undeniably captivating about him. At one point, Tyler leaned in slightly, his voice softening as he spoke. "You know, Megan, you're not like anyone I've ever met. There's something about you, it's impossible not to notice." The words caught Megan off guard, leaving her momentarily speechless. She was fully aware that Tyler was crossing a line, but deep down, she also knew she wasn't entirely blameless. She had let their dynamic evolve into something more personal, and as wrong as it was, it stirred something in her, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. The next morning, Nathan decided to call Megan, hoping to hear her voice and ease his growing unease. When she didn't answer, he told himself she must be busy, but her silence only made his anxiety worse. Later that afternoon, they finally spoke, but the conversation was short and strained. Megan sounded distracted, and Nathan couldn't shake the sense that she was holding something back. On the final day of the retreat, during a meeting on the terrace, Tyler made a remark that left Megan squirming in her seat. "Let's all hope Megan continues to inspire us with her remarkable presence," he said, his eyes fixed on her. Laughter rippled through the group, but Megan felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. Tyler's comment was blatantly inappropriate, and she couldn't ignore the unease it caused, not just for her but potentially for her professional reputation. When Megan returned home, Nathan greeted her with a noticeable distance. He asked how the retreat had gone, and her responses were vague, carefully avoiding any mention of Tyler. But as she spoke, Nathan felt there was an unspoken tension beneath her words, something she wasn't ready to admit. Eventually, Megan decided it was time to be honest about what she was feeling, but the conversation quickly spiraled into an argument. Fueled by Nathan's suspicions and her own internal conflict, Megan blurted out something that shattered him completely. "Nathan, I think I need to put this to rest once and for all. Maybe spending a night with Tyler would resolve this tension and help me move on." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap, leaving Nathan staring at her in stunned silence. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. His wife, the woman he had loved and trusted for 2 decades, had suggested this as a solution. "You really think that's an answer?" he asked, his voice trembling with disbelief and pain. "You think honesty makes this okay?" Megan tried to defend herself, saying she was being transparent and that it was better than lying or pretending. But to Nathan, her reasoning felt like a betrayal deeper than any secret could have been. Without another word, Nathan rose from his seat and walked to their bedroom. He grabbed a suitcase and began packing, his movements cold and deliberate. Megan stood frozen, unsure of what to say or do. As he zipped up the bag, he looked at her, his voice icy and final. "If that's what you think makes sense, then good luck. I'm not going to stick around for it." With that, he walked out, leaving Megan standing in stunned silence, grappling with how everything had spiraled so quickly. Nathan drove aimlessly through the city that night, his thoughts a whirlwind of anger, hurt, and confusion. He couldn't comprehend how the woman he had built a life with could even entertain such an idea. The weight of her words crushed him, and for hours, he roamed the streets, trying to make sense of what had happened. Eventually, he realized he had to go home. Grace and James deserved to know what was going on, even if he didn't yet have the right words to explain it. When he pulled into the driveway, he noticed Megan's car was gone. A glance at the clock on his dashboard told him it was well past midnight. The house was silent as he stepped inside, the stillness pressing down on him like a heavy blanket. His kids were likely asleep, oblivious to the storm brewing around them. He decided he would face the difficult conversation with them in the morning. Despite barely sleeping, Nathan was up early the next day, brewing a pot of strong coffee and sitting at the kitchen table, lost in thought. James was the first to come downstairs, still rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "Dad, you're home. Where's Mom?" James asked, his voice laced with confusion. Nathan took a steadying breath before responding. "James, we need to talk. Could you go get your sister, please?" A few minutes later, Grace appeared, immediately noticing the serious expression on her father's face. "What's going on? Why are you here so early?" she asked, concern evident in her tone. Nathan gestured for them to sit down. "I know this is sudden, but there's something important I need to tell you," he began, his voice calm but heavy. "Your mom and I are going through a difficult time." He carefully explained that Megan had made choices that affected their family, avoiding graphic details but being truthful about the seriousness of the situation. Grace interrupted, her worry spilling out. "Is she okay? Where is she?" "She's fine physically," Nathan assured her, "but she decided to take some time away." James frowned, his confusion deepening. "Is she coming back?" Nathan paused, his gaze shifting between his children. "I hope so," he said honestly. "But I can't say for sure. What's most important right now is that we stick together as a family." While Nathan tried to hold things together at home, Megan was following through with her reckless plan. She met Tyler at a hotel, convinced it might help her untangle her conflicted emotions. But as the evening unfolded, she began to see the situation for what it truly was. Tyler's charm and confidence quickly gave way to an air of self-interest. It became painfully clear that he was far more invested in the thrill of pursuit than in any genuine connection with her. Megan felt hollow, realizing how much she had risked for something so fleeting and shallow. Without a word, she abruptly left, tears streaming down her face as she drove home. Her mind raced with regret, the weight of her actions pressing down on her. When she arrived, the house was silent. Stepping inside, she found Nathan in the living room, a book in his hands. He looked up at the sound of the door, his expression unreadable but distant. "You came back," he said flatly, his tone devoid of emotion. Megan nodded, her voice shaky. "We need to talk." Before the conversation could go further, Grace and James appeared at the top of the stairs. Grace crossed her arms, her disappointment clear in her posture. "Mom, where were you?" she demanded. Megan felt the sting of her daughter's words. I had things I needed to figure out," she said, struggling to find the right explanation. James looked at his father, his confusion growing. "Why won't anyone tell us what's going on?" Nathan stood, glancing at Megan before addressing his children. "Maybe it's time we all talk about this together." They gathered in the living room, the tension thick. Megan spoke first, her words slow and deliberate. "I made a mistake, one that I deeply regret. I let my emotions lead me to do something I shouldn't have, and I'm so sorry for the pain I've caused." Grace shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "How could you? I thought we were a strong family." James sat silently, his expression a mixture of sadness and disbelief. Nathan stepped in, his voice steady but firm. "What matters now is figuring out how we move forward. Trust has been broken, and rebuilding that won't happen overnight." Megan turned to him, desperation in her voice. "I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I love you all more than anything." The days that followed were tense and strained. Megan tried to return to their usual routines, but the atmosphere in the house was heavy. Grace avoided her, spending most of her time either out with friends or locked in her room. James retreated into his drawings, keeping conversations with everyone minimal. Nathan remained polite but distant, his demeanor cold and detached. Evenings were quiet, each family member retreating to their own space early. Feeling like a stranger in her own home, Megan tried small gestures to reconnect. She cooked special meals and suggested game nights, but the responses were lukewarm and forced at best. One afternoon, determined to reach out, Megan knocked on Grace's door. "Can we talk?" she asked gently. Grace sighed, not turning to look at her. "What about?" Megan stepped inside, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I know I've hurt you, and you have every right to be upset. But I want you to know I'm here for you, no matter what." Finally, Grace met her mother's gaze. "How am I supposed to trust you again? You tore our family apart. Megan's eyes filled with tears. I know, and I regret it more than you can imagine. I've started getting help to understand why I did this. I want us to get through this together. Grace turned away, staring out the window. It's not going to be easy, she said quietly. It's going to take time. Desperate to salvage her marriage, Megan suggested couples therapy to Nathan. At first, he hesitated, but eventually, he agreed to try. During their sessions, they unpacked years of built-up resentment, unmet expectations, and the emotional distance that had grown between them. It was painful and raw, but it became clear that their problems ran much deeper than recent events. The family began therapy together, opening up about the emotions they had been bottling up. James spoke about his confusion and fear that his parents might split up, while Grace admitted to feeling betrayed, not only by her mother but also by the insecurity the situation had planted in her about relationships in general. Nathan and Megan assured their children that they would strive to be more open and involved, vowing to prioritize the family's healing. But despite their efforts, the road to reconciliation was anything but smooth. Some days brought glimmers of progress, moments where it felt like they were on the right track. Other days, old wounds would resurface, and the tension would return. Megan understood that rebuilding trust would take time, patience, and steady, deliberate actions to prove her commitment. One evening, as the family sat in the living room, Megan suggested they watch a movie they had once enjoyed together. There was a brief pause, an unspoken hesitation in the air. Slowly, though, they all settled in. As the film played, timid laughter and a few light-hearted comments broke through the silence. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was a faint echo of the harmony they had lost. The moment wasn't perfect, but it was a small step forward, a flicker of hope in the darkness. The Davis family was facing an uphill battle, but little by little, they were learning to rebuild. Forgiveness, understanding, and unity became their shared goals, even if the path was far from clear. As weeks turned into months, the tension in the house remained thick. Megan continued her efforts to repair the damage she'd caused, but Nathan's demeanor stayed distant. He maintained a polite, almost mechanical precision in his roles as a father and husband, but his heart seemed absent from their marriage. The trust that had once been the foundation of their relationship had been deeply fractured, and Nathan showed no signs of letting down his guard. Megan, on the other hand, threw herself into every possible avenue for reconciliation. She attended therapy regularly, read books on relationships, and signed up for workshops on family connection. Yet, no matter how hard she tried, every attempt to bridge the gap between her and Nathan or the kids seemed to meet with a wall of silence and lingering doubt. The weight of her choices was becoming unbearable, and she began to question whether she could ever truly repair the damage she had done. One unremarkable day, while sorting through old files in the home office, Megan stumbled across an envelope tucked away among the papers. Inside was a collection of letters Nathan had written to her in the early years of their marriage. As she read them, her hands trembled and tears streamed down her face. The letters were filled with dreams of the future, plans for the family they had hoped to build, and heartfelt declarations of how much he believed in their love. The words hit her like a wave, bringing with them the painful realization of just how far she had drifted from the life they had envisioned together. Overwhelmed but resolute, Megan decided to write a letter to Nathan, a gesture to mirror what he had once done for her. For days, she pored over the memories they had shared, reflecting on her mistakes and the deep regret she carried. She wrote about how sorry she was and how much she wanted to find a way back to what they had once been. When the letter was finally finished, she quietly left it on Nathan's desk without saying a word. Nathan discovered the letter the following morning. Sitting alone in the office, he opened the envelope and began to read. His face remained unreadable as his eyes moved over each line. Megan's words were raw, filled with sorrow, and yet they reminded him of a version of her he hadn't seen in years, the driven, passionate woman he had fallen in love with. But even as her honesty stirred something in him, the depth of his hurt held him back. He wasn't sure if he could take the step she was asking of him. That night, as they sat down to dinner, Nathan finally broke the silence that had hung between them for so long. "I read your letter," he said, his voice even and calm, though he didn't look directly at Megan. The kids, sensing the serious mood, stayed silent. Megan's voice trembled as she asked, "And?" Nathan exhaled deeply, his expression unreadable. "It was honest, and I appreciate that. But words alone won't fix this." Megan nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat as tears threatened to fall. "I know, Nathan. I'm ready to do whatever it takes. Just tell me how I can show you I mean it." Before Nathan could respond, Grace spoke up, her voice steady but full of emotion. "Mom, I see that you're trying, but it's not just about Dad. You hurt all of us. It's going to take time." James, who had been quiet until now, finally chimed in, his tone uncertain but sincere. "I just want us to be a family again, but I don't know if that's even possible." Their words struck Megan like a blow, but she knew they were speaking their truth. Nathan looked at his children, and for the first time in what felt like forever, there was a hint of softness in his eyes. "I want us to be a family too," he said. "But it's going to take effort, from all of us." Over the following days, small shifts began to appear. Nathan, though still guarded, started to open up. He and Megan had longer conversations, ones that were more candid than they'd had in years. They reminisced about the good times and confronted the mistakes they had both made. Grace and James also began to lower their defenses, slowly allowing Megan to reconnect with them. The true turning point came a few weeks later during a family dinner. They were sitting together at the table when the doorbell rang. Nathan got up to answer it, and to everyone's surprise, it was Tyler, Megan's former coworker. He looked visibly uneasy, clutching an envelope in his hands. "I need to speak with you, Megan," Tyler said, glancing at Nathan but addressing her directly. Megan's face went pale. "Tyler? What are you doing here?" Tyler hesitated, clearly struggling to find the right words. "I realized I was wrong. I crossed a line I never should have, and I want to take responsibility for that. You deserve to hear it from me. I was a bad influence, and I'm sorry for the damage I caused. I nearly destroyed your family." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed his words. Tyler extended the envelope toward Megan. "These are all the messages and records from that time. I want you to have them, so there's no doubt about my intentions now. I'm trying to make things right." He turned to Nathan and added, "I hope you can forgive her. She deserves a second chance." Nathan took the envelope, opened it, and scanned the contents. There was nothing incriminating, but Tyler's gesture offered an unexpected perspective. For the first time, Nathan began to feel that Megan's efforts to make amends might be genuine. He nodded stiffly at Tyler and showed him out with a brief word of thanks. When Nathan returned to the living room, Megan was curled up on the couch, staring at the floor, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. He sat down beside her, the air heavy with unspoken emotions. After a long silence, Nathan finally spoke. "This doesn't undo what happened," he said quietly, "but it's a step forward." Megan looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you really think we can rebuild what we had?" Nathan took a moment to gather his thoughts. "I think we can try," he said. "But it's going to take commitment, from all of us." That night marked the beginning of a new chapter for the Davis family. Family therapy sessions became more productive, with everyone starting to share more openly. Nathan and Megan worked together to address the deeper cracks that had formed over the years, focusing on rebuilding their partnership. Grace and James began to engage more in family activities, and gradually, moments of laughter and connection began to return to their home. The journey was far from smooth. Forgiveness didn't come easily, and there were days when the weight of the past threatened to drag them back into old patterns. But through patience, understanding, and consistent effort, the Davises began to find their way back to one another. One evening, as they sat in the living room playing a board game, James cracked a joke that made Grace burst into laughter, a genuine, carefree sound that filled the room. Nathan glanced at Megan, and for the first time in months, he felt a flicker of hope. Forgiveness, they realized, was a long and challenging road. But sometimes, it's the only path to redemption, and the foundation for a stronger, more united family.